for further interactions.
Hi, thank you, Laura Lynn. I appreciate that. I'm also on the executive board of the BECOP organization as an events officer with Laura Lynn, and we also have Joyce Wang with us, who is also our engagements officer. So thank you for having us. And what I'd like to do is let you know that my job normally is working in IT at the health system. And so I do a project management of one of our application teams there, and it's been really fulfilling with sort of utilizing lean processes to get our team itself on a better path for getting things done. And so thank you for letting me facilitate today. I wanted to go ahead and let Dr. Balzer go ahead and speak to us about his overview of his awesome book, Lean in Higher Education. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Bill. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for putting this together. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you. I had the pleasure about 2 or 3 weeks ago of actually visiting your campus. I was out there as part of the NCCI conference doing a joint presentation with 2 of your colleagues, Aaron Crickard and Mojan Amini. So I got to tour the campus briefly and safely, but beautiful, beautiful campus, and a little different than the flatlands, what we call the Great Black Swamp of Northwest Ohio, which is where I live and work. So, it's a real honor to be the book for the book club. I appreciate the invitation to speak today. This is the 2nd edition of the book, Lean Higher Education. And it's organized a little bit differently than the 1st edition. The 1st edition was the way I wanted to organize the book. And in the spirit of lean, of continuous improvement and voice of customer, the book came up with a bit of a different reorganization or organization. So it's a 9-chapter book, and just briefly, what's in the book, about lean higher education. First chapter really pretty much sets it up, like, why do we need lean in higher education? And I think all of us who've been in higher education for a year or so, or maybe as a student of higher education, you can see processes that really aren't working to the benefit of the beneficiary, whether that's a student, a staff member, a faculty member, an alumni, or a student. They're just not working the way that they should. So chapter 1 sort of sets the stage and talks about what lean is all about. The 2nd chapter jumped into a real full example of a lean project that we did at BGSU many years back. We were looking at our student counseling center. We had some real problems, great committed counselors, everybody trying to do the best that they can, but we couldn't get to students quickly enough. And very typically, compared to other institutions as well, our students were waiting about 3 full weeks before they were able, from when they think they needed to get some help to when they could start getting help from one of our great counselors. Counselors couldn't figure out how to do it. It certainly wasn't the counselors. Using lean processes, we were able to take that from a 3-week wait to walk-in service without adding a single additional body, and actually serving an additional 25% more students in the process. So without going into the details, that's what's in chapter 2, but it shows you the power of what lean can do. Chapter 3 is really building out. It talks about 16 different universities who shared their lean journey and some examples of their lean projects. So you can see that it's not a one-trick pony. It works all around the world, big and small universities, implemented in very different ways, sometimes more successfully than other, sometimes more broadly than other, but it works across higher education. Chapter 4 talks about how do you get ready, or how do you know when you're ready to do lean? So is your institution ready? And if it's not, how can you help get your institution ready? And if you can't get them ready, how can you do it locally? I mean, you can do lean in your office for yourself, even if you can't do it across your university. The next group of chapters 5 and 6 actually to walk through, here's how you would do a lean project, a rapid improvement event. From A to Z, how that would work. So preparing for the rapid improvement event, conducting the rapid improvement event, and then implementing and sustaining the rapid improvement event. And throughout those chapters, and again, this was the feedback from previous readers, to give them a running example, as well as to show them what are the tools you would use at each of the steps along the way. Chapter 7 was a new chapter, was added in the second edition, which is, we talk about lean in a lot of backroom processes like in IT or administration or wherever it might be, but really what we do, the core business we have is education. We're not really doing a lot of lean inside the academic affairs area. So that chapter is really trying to demonstrate how it could really be helpful in improving courses, in improving programs, and in improving, undergraduate and graduate education. So some models as well as some examples of where it's worked there. Chapter 8 again is a new chapter. And this was, well, how do you sell it to senior administration? I'm really enthusiastic. I like it, but how do I convince the senior administrators that this is a good thing to do? So chapter 8 is talking about what the senior administrators want from lean higher education, and looking at some of the metrics they value or what might help them understand why it would be important to bring into their institution, as well as what's going to be expected from them if it's brought in. The way they lead, the way we manage in the organization changed dramatically in a lean organization. So helping them understand that there's change from the top down that needs to take place. And then chapter 9 is sort of the conclusion, the vision of the future, the research that needs to happen. So it's, the book sort of brings you through. It's very practical. It's designed for someone who doesn't know anything about lean and wants to learn a little bit more. It's for someone who's doing a rapid improvement event. How do I make sure that I'm following all the best practices, or what are some things that I can be doing? It's got a lot of resources at the end of the book, communities that you can join, resources you can use online to help you get the most out of your lean experience. It's for practitioners who've been doing it for years, as well as researchers. I'm more of a researcher than a practitioner in lean higher education. So really trying to make sure that the book is addressing the needs of all those individuals.
That is so awesome. And I do want to note that the book also has a wonderful companion guide, which actually guides users and gives them some preparation for the content that they're going to discover in each chapter. And I think that's super helpful, super beneficial. And so I think it's a genius idea to have a companion for your book.
Shame on me for not mentioning that.
I'm sorry.
Shame on me for not mentioning that. I want to thank Ruth Archer from Michigan Tech University for actually suggesting it based on feedback that she got from book clubs that they do at MTU. She and I worked on that for quite a while. So thanks for mentioning that, Tor.
No problem. I think it's great. So I do have a couple of questions that I want to ask you before we sort of move forward. And if you're ready for them, I'll ask first. Please define your profession of an industrial organizational psychologist.
Great, happy to do it. So gold star to UCSD, you actually have an undergraduate course in industrial organizational psychology in your department of psychology. So you can find out more there. And I also can tell you there are about 30 graduate programs in the great state of California in industrial organizational psychology. The majority of them are master's programs. So one after a bachelor's degree, to be an IO psychologist, you would need to go on to graduate school and master's or a doctoral degree. But I'm sure most people, at one point or another, maybe took a course in psychology or at least brushed up against psychology. But it's really the study of mind and behavior. That's what psychology is all about. So how do we perceive the world? How do we develop beliefs, attitudes? What are our intentions about what we want to do? What are our behaviors? And it looks at what we do well. There's a whole area of positive psychology, mistakes we make, and there are many mistakes we make, and then how to improve or change through psychology. In the field of psychology, there are more than 50 different specializations within psychology, clinical being the biggest one. And most of us know about clinical psychology. We know people, maybe you've gone to therapy, whatever it is. There's forensic psychology, which is really, really big right now. because of all the TV shows that talk about forensic psychology and criminal minds and all that sort of stuff. Developmental psychology, how we change over time from infants to children to adolescents to adults to geriatrics, developmental. There's health psychology, but my area is industrial organizational psychology, which is the application of psychological theories and principles to people in the workplace. So I take psychology and I do it in the workplace. So we know a lot in psychology about individual differences and personality. People differ, their personalities are different. So how can we use that to select people into an organization to make sure that they're able to do the job and it's a job that's a good fit for them? So that's one example of how an IO psychologist would use basic psychology in an applied way. Another example is, how do we do professional training and development in organizations? Well, we know a lot about learning theory in psychology. So how can we use the basics of learning theory to really develop our professional development programs? So, you know, leadership groups, there's every place you can use it in an organization. People spend a lot of time at work. People identify themselves through work. So work is a sort of a fun place to be applying psychology. Employee attitudes and their behaviors are critical to organizational success. So IO psychologists, and there are only about 10,000 of us, which is a small number, a drop in the bucket, you know, compared to lots of other areas of psychology. But we can have a big impact by helping organizations be successful, you know, and making their lives in the organization better as well.
Sorry, awesome, thank you. That was an excellent answer. It really gives us a full, you know, view of all of the wonderful things that an IO psychologist does and how it affects wonderful workplaces for successful fits and successful behavior. So thank you. I have another question, and it's this one. So in your words, Dr. Balzer, who is Dr. Bill Balzer?
So this is almost like a projective test, you know, like it's something a clinical psychologist might ask. But let me give you it from multiple perspectives. I'm a first generation college graduate. I was the second of 9 kids from a sort of lower middle class family in New York. My parents had no way to really fund 9 kids going to college, but they knew everybody needed to go to college. They knew the value of higher education. And thank goodness for public higher education, because it provided that opportunity, that front door for people to enter at a very low cost and get a wonderful education. So that's sort of how I started in higher education. You know, as in my undergraduate work, I was a psychology major, and I really wanted to be a cop when I grew up. I came from a family of cops. I wanted to be a cop. It was really hard to be a cop at that time. And I said, well, maybe there's a way to use psychology to get into the police department. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, maybe how we select police officers, you know, using some psychological theories and principles there. So I went to pursue my master's degree to have an applied job in psychology, in industrial organizational psychology. And I actually fell in love with research. I fell in love with teaching. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go on. And 40 years later, more than 40 years later, I haven't left. So I've been in higher education, started out as an assistant professor at Bowling Green State University, worked my way up through professor, then I was program director, became department chair, became a dean in a couple different areas, currently a vice president in the area of faculty and strategic initiatives at Bowling Green, and did a couple different stints along the way. So it's been a great, I mean, it's really a privilege, and I'm sure you all appreciate it as well. A real privilege working in public higher education. We have such a great mission. You know, it's the dissemination and creation of knowledge. What could be more noble than that? You know, the good that we do for society. So all of us get to play a role in that. And it's always sort of resonated with me along the way. So, you know, I get to apply psychology every day in whatever job I've had, you know, for our department chairs, our academic department chairs. You know, they needed training and development. Well, as an IO psychologist, I knew how to put together to do a needs assessment and develop a training and development program based on good principles and practices. So rather than maybe dry stand-up presentations, we actually did some scenarios, and everybody likes to do a scenario because they think they're pretty good at it. When you give them a really complicated scenario, it really shows them that maybe I need to learn more about this issue. And then what are some really good ways of addressing it? So, and right now, honestly, and don't tell my bosses this, but one of my jobs is to look at how we make decisions at the university. And psychology tells us we take a lot of shortcuts when we make decisions because we want to get to them quickly. That's the way we survived, over tens of thousands of years. So how do we fight those shortcuts like confirmation bias, which is looking for information that confirms what you believe now rather than something that discounts it. So really helping other senior leaders catch themselves and catch myself as well when we might be making a confirmation bias, which may lead to a less than effective decision. I'll tell you, I hate to write, and you'll say that's really odd for somebody who's written a book. I just hate writing, but I love having written. So getting that first word on that blank page is or screen is really, really hard for me. But then being able to look back at it, whether it's a research article or whether it's a book, it's really again a great opportunity, and I get paid by my institution to think and to write. I mean, again, no one has a better job than I do. So I guess that's who I am. Very enthusiastic about the promise of lean, especially in higher education. I see so many great opportunities, and I know UCSD is already doing a lot in this area. I think you're becoming one of the leaders in the United States and giving the Western European countries a run for their money. So.
Wow, I love it. We do have a couple comments from the chat, but I do want to just tell you that you have a magnificent story. I'm particularly interested in it, and it's very appealing to me because I am married to a police officer, and the fact that that was your journey in the beginning and wanting to, just sort of be an influencer positively, and now what you've done with your IO is to be able to influence large organizations and just make things much more better and positive for outcomes. So I really love that your philosophy was going to begin in law enforcement. Yeah. So let's get to some of the comments. Our very own engagements officer, Joyce, says she did her master's in and she loves IO.
Oh, great.
Says, thank you for defining it as that is part of the challenge.
I hope I did it justice, Joyce.
She's giving you a thumbs up. And then we have an awesome comment from Mojgan, who you toured with. And she says she absolutely agrees, and you have a great mission.
Thanks, Mojgan. Yeah, I think we all, and again, and I know the model of public higher education in California is really what the rest of the country hopes it can emulate. Through your well-integrated community colleges, to the state system, to the university system, you've really invested in. You're investing in people and their futures, and what a great way to change lives. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and start our BECOP Q&A. We've focused a little bit on you, and I think you may have answered this, but I just sort of want to get into this question as well. It's one thing to do your wonderful work as an IO psychologist, but with your background and everything that you've done, what prompted you to sort of write about it, to write the book? What was it that said, I need to write a book about this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tara. So, as an IO psychologist, you're always on the hunt, for what's the next thing that we might be able to help organizations implement to make the lives of employees better and make the organizations more effective. So, a lot of the things we do are often trade-offs. It might be really good for the organization, but it may not be great for employees. or it may be better for employees, but organizations are saying, well, it's not good enough for us. So you're looking for something that really finds a great balance. So about almost 20 years ago, one of my colleagues at BGSU, Tom Andrews, who oversaw our quality systems program, he said, hey, Bill, you might want to come to this 3-day workshop that we're doing on lean manufacturing. Do you know anything about that? You know, it's big changes in the way companies like Toyota are really, you know, making themselves more effective, as well as taking care of their employees, and most importantly, taking care of their customers. I said, I don't know anything about it, Tom, but I'm happy to come. I went to that 3-day workshop and I was just enamored by it, because it really had this not zero-sum approach where if someone wins, somebody else loses, but a non-zero-sum approach where it's going to be good for the organization, it's going to be good for the employee, and importantly, it's going to be good for the people you serve, the customer or student in higher education. It was a very evidence-based problem-solving approach, so it had some good research behind it, but it was largely ignored by us psychologists. I mean, I couldn't find anybody in my field, or Joyce in my field, who were doing things actively in lean. So that got me interested in what it was all about, but working in higher education, saying like, gosh, if this works in manufacturing, can it work in higher education? So I was a dean at the time, and I had a vice president friend who said, use my division as your sandbox. So this is where we did that counseling center project that I mentioned earlier. We did another project in the health center. Very quickly in the health center, very student-centric doctors and health practitioners there, but they were also having trouble getting through. Lots of waiting in the waiting room. So as one example, because they were so student-oriented, if they said, student A, you need to go down to the lab to get some lab work done, the building was a maze. So they said, let me walk you down there. Great thing for them to do, but all that lost service time while the health practitioner walked down and then walked back. One of the things that we did, we put like stripes on the wall. Follow the green stripe if you need to go to the lab, follow the brown stripe if you need to go to the pharmacy. So we could help the students get there without getting lost in this maze of a building, and then save all that practitioner time to better serve students. So we were able to do lots of projects, and I said, it works in higher education. So now, who's talking about this? Couldn't find a lot. So I said, well, the way I learn about things is by reading, integrating, and writing. So with probably more hubris than I should have had, you know, I didn't know a whole lot about lean. So it was probably pretty arrogant of me to say, well, I'll write a book about lean higher education. That's what I did. That led to the first edition of the book. And that's what sort of got the ball rolling.
I think that's awesome. I think that was just the continuous improvement that you did in that health center was awesome. I mean, and look, the customer is affected. I do want to clarify that after we ask Bill his questions, we're going to have some Q&A because we've got some already in the chat. But I do want to also clarify that Mojgan had wanted to say that her comment was higher education has a great mission. And that's what she was saying earlier. So I'm sorry about that. But we will definitely ask that question as soon as we're done with Bill. And so thank you. That was excellent. I'll go to the next question. And it is, how has writing the book and the analysis in the writing of the book, how has that affected your own work-life balance? What has it done for you?
Well, you know, being an academic, work-life balance is always out of whack. And it's because you love what you're doing. So it's hard to, you know, find those boundaries. So my wife, when I was a faculty member, she'd say, why are you working over the summer? You're on a 9-month contract, crying out loud. I said, because this is what I love doing. It's not a job. It's just what I love doing. So there's always been imbalance, but it created a little bit different kind of imbalance, because as the book started me thinking like a lean person, and everything I do, and it's like a curse and a blessing at the same time. You see the world through the lean lens. So in terms of that work-life balance, my children, when they were younger, hated going anywhere with me, because we would go to a store and I would say, look at that process. Look at what they're doing. Where's the waste in the process? Look at the waiting that's going on. And they would say, Dad, don't say anything. So it really started to bleed over into family and looking at processes we had in our family, how we could lean them out to be a little bit better in our home processes. Now all of them are, well, I shouldn't say all of them, 3 of the 4 are real lean thinkers. They've taken courses on lean, one's working on a belt in lean. So it's, they've sort of adopted this general, like, lean can help you make your life a little bit better. One of my daughters works up in the Michigan health system for the University of Michigan, and they're very, very big into lean up there. They're one of the leaders in the medical field or higher education medicine. So, I'm happy she's there and she's doing good work in that area. It certainly has spilled over into my work area. Again, I'm always promoting and applying lean in my work. The way I try to store documents on my computer, if you have a standard way of doing it, it's always a lot easier to find files afterwards or other people to find your files. But, doing but what we call a Genva walk, going to where work is done and seeing what's happening, going over to the bookstore as an example, when the semester is starting and looking at the lines, the queues of students who need to buy books or supplies and saying, that's a process that we need to streamline. Because that's the waste of waiting. And no student should have to wait. Their time is as valuable as our time, and nobody's making us wait in lines. So really trying to do those sorts of things to help people look at their processes from the perspective of the customer, in that case, a student, or visual management, just putting things up so that people can see visually what's going on in a process. And by making it visual, it helps my coworkers, see, my gosh, that's really a broken process. Why? I've never seen it before. Now that I can see it, let's tackle it together. So things like that have really helped me apply it throughout my life. So it really opened the door for me to start thinking like a lean person and giving me many opportunities to meet with lean higher education colleagues from around the world. And there's a lot of good work being done on every continent, actually. Western Europe really starting the ball rolling, spilling out to the Americas, and then down into Australia, in Asia, on the continent of Africa. So it's really everywhere now, and great people doing great work.
Wow, I love that. And as a mom, my takeaway is that you have children that you have influenced to be great lean practitioners. And that is like top of my list for work-life balance, is just making sure that the children that we bring into this world are actually fulfilling some type of an awesome prophecy, right? So good job, Bill. I love that. I'll ask the next question. And I really like this one. Have you had feedback from organizations who have changed models and made improvements based on your book's philosophy?
So, chapter 3 of my book talks about 16 universities sharing their stories. And sadly, because of page limitations, I had a limit at the 16 institutions, but many more wanted to sort of, identify themselves in the book and share their success stories. But there's a lot of lean success out there. And what my book tried to do was try to capture that. I was taking their experiences, what they've learned, some of their models, and creating a philosophy from this community of practice, again, that exists all around the world. So gather what they're doing, what are best practices, what are evidence-based practices, try to integrate it and reflect it back throughout the book. But at the same time, because I'm more of a researcher than a practitioner, try and push the envelope a little bit too. Where we need to do more hard-headed thinking, where do we need to do some research, where are the challenges that we're facing? Like one of the big challenges of, our core mission is teaching and scholarship, but we're not doing it in teaching and scholarship. We're doing it in admissions. We're doing it in student services. We got to get it into the core mission. So really trying to challenge our colleagues to do it in those areas. It allowed me, again, to develop this great network of LHE colleagues. There's Lean HE Global as well as Lean HE Americas that you can join to really, become part of a community of practice. As I said earlier, great colleagues like Mojan and Aaron, who, I got to meet and learn from during, our work together, which has just been terrific. I continue to publish papers, give talks on lean issues. We got to get beyond case studies. I keep beating that drum. We need to do some real, research studies. The psychology of lean, it underlies everything that we do. And there's a lot of psychology in it. And a paper that I'm working on with some colleagues in the United States and Australia right now is lean failure. One of the things that lean is all about is you learn a lot from failure, but most of us have been trained to hide our failures because no one wants to put them out there into the limelight. But it's by looking at your failures is what makes you better. And the andon cord in a lean factory, you pull that cord, it stops the line right away, and everybody fixes the problem right then and there. So failure is critical in the lean world, and we just need to do a little bit more of that. As I learned and received more, that's what helped me do the second edition of the book. I thought I could get away with some slight editing. It turned out to be a major rewrite, which is probably better for everybody who has to read the book. So.
Wow, that is so awesome. And I will say that Laura Lynn herself agrees 100% about failure. She's commenting in the comments that it's very important that we learn from failure.
Yeah, and it's very hard in most American organizations where you're rewarded and motivated by practices that say, you have to be successful. Whereas, in the world of research, you do a study, you don't learn it, the study fails, you do another study, the study fails. I mean, that's what the research process is all about. So we really have to change the culture of higher education. And that's, again, what lean is all about, allowing people to, bring their problems to the surface and identifying and fixing them. We have the tools through lean to do that. So it's quite easy.
We do have a question. We've already got 3 questions. We're going to ask them after this last question to you in our BECOP question time, but I'm going to save all of the questions that we have in chat for the actual community questions to you. But before we get to question number 4, I was going to show a brief video. And so I would like to go ahead and do that now. Give me a second. And here we go.
He's spinning.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have no midsize available at the moment.
I don't understand. I made a reservation. Do you have my reservation?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, we ran out of cars.
But the reservation keeps the car here. That's why you have the reservation.
I know why we have reservations.
I don't think you do. If you did, I'd have a car. See, you know how to take the reservation, you just don't know how to hold the reservation. And that's really the most important part of the reservation, the holding. Anybody can just take them.
Let me speak with my supervisor.
Here we go.
So we sort of wanted to add some light to the conversation. So first, before I ask the question, what is that an example of?
What a great example of a process that isn't working from the perspective of the customer, right? It's just, again, and Jerry Seinfeld is just terrific in really, pulling that out. But the process was working for the rental company, at least from their perspective, but the voice of the customer was really loud and clear there, right? And a lot of the process didn't seem visible to anybody and what was happening. So it's just a snippet of a really fundamentally broken process. And then going to talk to the supervisor is just another example where an employee isn't empowered to fix a broken process, but has to go to a supervisor who probably never does the process. So we have all these employees who are not using their whole brain to actually make things better for the organization, but turning it over to leaders or supervisors who may not even have ever done a reservation in their life. So it's a great example of the opportunities for improvement in processes.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Let me ask that last question. It is, What boundaries do organizations need to focus on with regards to lean?
Yeah, so that's a really broad question, but I think in some ways there are no boundaries. Lean can be applied across a continuum, and it can be done, again, as I said earlier, you can lean your own work, a process that you've developed to get your work done. It's very easy to use those principles of continuous improvement, of respect for yourself, respect for your customer, to do that. And then we can do what's called enterprise lean higher education, which is actually cutting across organizations where we're working with suppliers, like high schools, or working with customers, like employers, and sort of bringing lean not only into our own systems, but into their systems as well, and everything in between. And there's a table in my book, table 9.3, some great work done by some colleagues over in Scotland, Rachel McCassie and Steve Yorkstone, which really does a nice job of what would a developmental model of lean higher education look like. So where might you start simply and then grow it to university. But not everybody wants to grow it university-wide. University of Michigan wants to do it differently than university-wide. So they have a very different model, which works very, very effectively for them. So there really are no boundaries to what you can do, but you really need to look at the readiness of your institution to figure out maybe which model is most appropriate. That is, can we go big university-wide, or do we need to do maybe some proof of concept before we can convince senior leadership, or there's something in the senior leadership that's going to block it? So maybe I'm just going to do it locally where I'm allowed to do it. So things we want to look at, because this is large scale change of an organization, and large scale change, whatever you're doing, whether it's lean or something else, large scale change is hard. But looking at leadership practices, looking at the culture of the institution, looking at motivation and reward practices, as I mentioned earlier, if those are inconsistent with lean and they can't change, it might be hard to implement lean. Strategic planning, communication practices. So you'd want to sort of do a little bit of an examination of where your institution is now to decide, maybe I can do it locally, maybe I can do it within my functional area, maybe I can do it across a couple of units, maybe, hopefully we can do it university-wide. So once you've assessed the readiness, you probably have a better sense of what you might need to be successful. And sometimes it's okay. And I talk to a lot of institutions, and sometimes it's talking with them and saying, yeah, you're not ready for lean, not yet. Or if that's your view, that you're doing this to remove people from the organization, to reduce your FTE of employees, full-time equivalent employees, you don't want to do lean, because that is not lean. Cutting people is not lean. So sometimes it's really understanding what your organization wants to do. So hope that helps.
I think that was an excellent answer. Thank you. I really think that it covers exactly what we asked about boundaries. Thank you. And so at this point, we have time to go ahead and open it up for the questions. So I'll go ahead and read them out. The first one is from Mojgan, and she says, Bill, you talk about getting lean into the classroom or learning processes, not just the administrative ones, as the next frontier in lean higher education. How do you suggest approaching this, and where do you suggest starting this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Mojgan, and I know we've had some broader conversations about this. Almost everybody who's a lean practitioner has not been an academic. Bob Emiliani at the University of Connecticut is an academic. Vincent Weigel is an academic. So there are some who have an academic background, but many of them are administrators. So one thing that is really helpful is to try to get some academics on board to make sure you're understanding their perspective. And there are lots of faculty members who are doing research or teaching in the area of lean or something similar to lean, quality systems, continuous improvement, in maybe the College of Business, and you're in a College of Technology or something. So sometimes it's finding those folks who understand it and helping them help you bring it over onto the academic side of the house. Some faculty members are just simply so fed up with slow processes or bad processes that they become champions of change within the institution. So finding those champions and giving them a platform and an opportunity to work together is another way, because if it's led by faculty, it'll help maybe convince more skeptical faculty members to participate. So by bringing in some faculty, people with faculty backgrounds, and particularly because they understand what some of those barriers are going to be. A faculty member is going to say, wait a minute, students aren't customers, higher education is not a business. They have this immediate, knee-jerk reaction that we are so different than everybody else. So you need to understand that. I don't think it's true. I mean, health systems have done this successfully, and there's nothing more like higher education than a hospital, right? You've got lots of clients that you're serving. The doctors run the hospital. I mean, that's where the expertise is and so forth. And they figured out a way to do it successfully. So I know you guys are doing it in your health system. So I think some of that expertise can maybe help bleed over as well. But then to show them some examples, and again, in chapter 7 of the book, there are some examples where it's actually being done in a classroom or in a graduate degree program. One project that was actually done by undergraduate students as a class project to improve an academic process, to show you that there are ways to get there pretty easily. So those are just some initial thoughts, but and there's shared governance and academic freedom. I don't want to leave those out. Certainly important fundamental principles to academics. I'm an academic. I embrace those as well. But there are ways. Academic freedom doesn't mean you don't give feedback to your students, until 10 weeks after they take an exam. As a really egregious example, what's the process? So we can help a faculty member fix that process so that all faculty members can give very quick feedback to their students so they can do correction along the way. And we help the faculty member do it. It's good for the faculty member, it's great for the student, and it's good for the institution as well. So, that's where that, lean can really come into play.
Thank you, Bill. We have another question from Adam Royce, who is at the health system with me. He says, how do you change the psychology of failure? And how do you make leadership see failure as an opportunity to improve?
That's a great question, Adam. And that will be the challenge. And it really requires that fundamental culture change. And as we know, culture change is very difficult. The approach that I sort of take to culture change is you've got to change the behaviors first, and then the culture will change after that. So it's sort of helping find some examples, demonstrations, if you will, in meetings with leaders where you are, and I don't mean you, Adam, I mean whoever the individual is, but to really show sort of that A3 approach, which we call in lean, is to say, I have a problem. Here are all the consequences of my problem. I've done a root cause to figure out what is leading to that problem. Me and others on the team have identified some solutions. We've tested them. These solutions work. We've implemented them, and look how things have changed. So and look at the benefits to a student, to the employee, to the institution. So helping them see some examples that by bringing those forward and then using the lean process, we're showing people that it's really the process that's broken, not the people. And we have tools for fixing the process, and we can do it very quickly, and it benefits everybody. So then people say, oh, you mean if I bring up a problem, it's not going to reflect on me, that is, I'm a bad supervisor or I'm a bad leader, but rather it's a bad process. And I know how to identify bad processes, and rather than bury them and continue to have them make it hard on employees, make it hard on students, alumni, donors, whoever it might be, I can now fix it and make our university better. And then getting the senior leaders, what I say at my institution, in the performance review of senior leaders, you've got to make it really clear that they've got to identify and fix broken processes. That's got to be part of their job. and helping their subordinates do that. So again, by changing those behaviors, having them do it, then the culture starts to loosen up a little bit. And then you reward them for doing that. Then you communicate to everybody. So you start to change all of these institutional practices that are in support of saying it's okay to fail, but you've got to, again, I bring the failures to light and fix them. That's what Lean's all about. Great question, Adam.
Yeah, great question. A lot of people are saying great question, Adam. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Balzer. We do have a comment from Cindy Sue. She says, fail, F-A-I-L, equals first attempt in learning.
Terrific. Cindy, did you develop that? Because I'm writing it down. I'm going to steal it. But yeah, actually, if it's yours, I'd love to give you credit for it. I'd love it.
Oh, I did not develop that. That was something I recently heard from elsewhere, and the more about it, the more true it has become. And earlier, when you're talking about failure and success, that acronym immediately came to mind. So I had to put that in the comment.
That's great. Thank you. I've not heard that, but it'll become part of my jargon. So thank you so much.
I love it. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Dr. Balzer. So we've got another question from Adam, and it says, how do you feel about teaching basic lean in public high schools as preparation for future employment?
Adam, I am solidly behind it. I think again, I like lean, of course, so I might be a little biased, but I think if you're teaching students at any level the scientific process and how one solves problems, what employer at whatever level, entry level, mid-level, senior level, wouldn't want to see those skills in their employees? So I think teaching it in high school as a tool or as a course would be a wonderful thing. Interestingly, at Michigan Tech University, they bring undergraduates in who work in the lean office. They develop all these lean skills. And while they're not going into the lean profession, they get gobbled up by employers because they're like a content expert in the major they went into, but now they have all these wonderful problem-solving skills as well. So I think it's a great thing to share. It's a great thing to share. And again, it's like, okay, I've got a problem in life, in work, and wherever it is. I'm going to use the PDCA process, plan, do, check, act. And I've got a really nice, direct, easy way to start fixing problems myself, or DMAIC, whatever acronym or approach you use. Yeah, so I think it's a wonderful thing. Great set of skills. And as I said earlier, Adam, my kids are seeing it. When you line up, you're making those sandwiches for lunch when they're going to school. You got to make those sandwiches in the morning. There's a lean way to make lunch, I can tell you. And showing them that and talking to, and they rolled their eyes during it, but they got to see, an approach that, again, they're now using in their lives.
That is so awesome. We actually have a comment from Mojgan regarding the high school and middle school. The middle school on campus at UC San Diego is called the Proust School. And she says, by the way, we're coordinating a Lean Six Sigma class next semester at the Proust School for grades 6 through 12 at UC San Diego. So that's awesome. It's our charter school on campus.
Yeah, terrific. Terrific. That's great. I'd love to hear how it goes.
Oh, wow. And Mojgan is giving us that Alora is the coordinator, in case anyone wants to chip in on it, for anyone in the BECOP community who's interested. Adam is commenting that he is highly process driven, which he is. I've had the pleasure of working with Adam. He's very process driven. He's all about efficiency and making sure things are lean. So thank you, Adam, for even joining us too as well.
Yeah, great questions.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. I was going, and so Mojgan and they're talking back and forth about efficiency. She's saying that her son is also the same way. Least effort. We do have an offer from UC San Diego Extension, Angela Miller, to see how Extension can help out with the Proust School Initiative for Lean. That's great. And so otherwise, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. Is there anything else you want to share with us, Dr. Balzer?
Yeah, I'd like to end, and Mojan and Aaron have heard this already, but you know, I think, you know, we really need to look at higher education through the lens that other people see us. And people see us as very expensive. They don't see often a lot of value. You know, their kids graduate or and maybe don't get a job. They don't see us as efficient. You know, there's lots of concerns about higher education. And I think a lot of those concerns are legitimate. But the one that I would ask everybody just maybe to think about is, and this is looking at, you know, national data. So each school is going to be different. But the national data says that students in fall of 2011, first-time, full-time undergraduate students, IPED's data, national data, indicate that only 4 in 10 of those students graduate in 4 years. So if we're offering 4-year degrees, and I would put an asterisk there, why does it have to be 4 years? Can we do it a little bit more efficiently and save people money and time? But if 60% of our students are failing, not graduating in 4 years, then that should really cause us to pause and say, are there some opportunities in higher education? And forget about, you know, looking at an admissions process, forget about looking at a course process, but really thinking about the meta process of disseminating education and giving people degrees. There's a lot of opportunity, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'm excited to see all of you interested in maybe exploring these opportunities, and really looking forward to hearing more about UCSD's lean journey.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Laura Lynn, our events officer. So thank you, Dr. Balzer.
Thank you, Tara.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This was a great session. And if anybody has any further questions, feel free to contact us and we can pass them on or get those questions answered. And we did put at the very beginning, we did put a link to download that companion guide that also should have gone out with the registration, I think a day or two ago. If anybody didn't get that, contact me, feel free. And we hope that if you haven't already gotten the book and read it, we encourage you to. Today's session was such a great session, overview of that. And I'm sure that the details, you know, in the book are just, you know, even more so. So this was really timely, really, really wonderful. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So hope everybody has a great day and we'll see you next time around.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.